Good afternoon, Rocky Ridge students. We are on Chapter 7 of Lunch Money, Order and Chaos. Ashford Intermediate School was a big outfit, and when you put 450 kids, mostly between the ages of 9 and 12, under one roof, a certain amount of hubbub and clutter is normal. And therefore, Room 27 was not normal. Room 27 was at Ashworth School was never messy, never loud. Room 27 was like a peaceful island, an oasis of order and calm. That's because the small kingdom known as Room 27 was controlled by Mr. Anthony Xenopoulos, who, for obvious reasons, was known simply as Mr. Z. Mr. Z was a man of average size, except perhaps for his head, which seemed a bit too large for his body, but that might have been an optical illusion, caused by the burst of black and gray hair sprawling out 1 or 2 inches in all directions. Apart from his unruly hair, Mr. Z dressed neatly, but not formally. He wore a coat and tie only for the end-of-year assembly. The rest of the time he wore khakis and corduroys, or loose-fitted collared shirts, carefully ironed. He had piercing dark eyes, a bright smile, which made it harder to notice the large nose that lived between them. Mr. Z taught 6th graders, and his kingdom, mathematics, ruled. Everything about his room, including his legendary calmness, was a function of math. Mr. Z did not teach 6th grade math. He lived math. He breathed math. He ate and slept and dreamed math. His wife taught geometry at high school, so you could say that he married math. Plus, their only son was an engineering major at the State University. For Mr. Z, math was the source of all that was beautiful, good, and true. Math controlled the orbits of the planets, always in perfect, stressless balance. Math was frictionless. Math supplied the principles that sent rockets past the moon and helped Beethoven create his symphonies. Mr. Z believed that even the smile on the Mona Lisa, like the spiral of the chambered Nautilus, could be expressed as a ratio of the elegant numbers. The alarm clock, the thermostat, the calendar, the digital watch on his wrist, the odometer in his car, the test and quiz scores of his students, the percentage points of his grading scale, gave him the numbers he lived by. He woke each day at 6:15, school or no school. Channel 7's forecast weather were the most accurate. He'd done a 3-year study himself, so a predicted high temperature of 70 degrees or warmer equals khaki pants plus a short sleeve shirt. 69 degrees or below equaled corduroys and long sleeves. And for high temperatures of 40 degrees or lower, 1 sweater. Mr. Z put his heavy down coat into storage on March 1st. And he got it out again October 1st. He had an appointment at his barber shop every third Thursday at 4:15 p.m. He changed the oil in his white Toyota Camry every 5,500 miles, and when the odometer reached 110,000 miles, the 20th oil change, he and his wife began shopping for a new white Camry. Why a Camry? Math. Camry was the car that cost the least amount of dollars, had the most features he could afford, and the fewest service problems. Why white? Again, math. White was the color that kept the inside temperature of his car the lowest in the summer, while running the air conditioner meant buying more gas and getting fewer miles per gallon. There were 185 schools days per year. 55 minutes in each class period. Mr. Z wrote the number of remaining minutes of math class on the board at the start of each school day, beginning at 10,175. Quiz scores counted once, test scores counted twice, grade percentages were calculated out of 3 decimal places, and then rounded up, and argued about grades. Grades was pointless. Numbers never lied. Mr. Z had a sense of humor, but it was a mathematical sense of humor. He wasn't witty or clever. He had almost endless supply of math puns. What did the triangle say to the circle? Your life seems so pointless. What did the 90-degree angle say to the 91-degree angle? Don't be obtuse. What did the plus sign say to the minus sign? You're always so negative. Why did the rectangular equilateral like jazz? It was a square, and so was Mr. Z. If Mr. Z seemed stiff or set in his ways or rigid in his views, that was a function of math as well. In math, there are fixed rules. Math involved pure operations that required no bending, no guesswork, no emotional judgments, only the glide and flow of intelligence. There was always answers, right answers, and the possible of understanding exactly what what was right about them. And that's why Mr. Z loved math. Loved, not liked. Not enjoyed, not appreciated, loved. He loved thinking about math. He loved using it. And most of all, he loved teaching it. Math was perfect. Math clarified the jumbled minds and disciplined the untidy lives of his students. So many things change constantly. Politics, weather, the price of energy, the cover of the Time magazine. Not math. As he told his students, now and forever, 2 plus 2 will always equal 4 every single day. But on this particular day, with 9,790 minutes of math class remaining in the 6th grade year, Greg Keaton came stomping into the orderly world of room 27 with a head full of chaos. He walked straight over to Morris Shaw. He slapped the Esty Bestie book down on her desk, and through clenched teeth, he said, Nice rip-off. You're such a thief. You stole my idea, and you know it. So stop it. Stop it now. Mora jumped up, nose to nose with Greg. Oh, sure, like you invented paper and drawings and words, too, right? Just so you know, anybody can make anything they want. And they can sell stuff, too. It's a free country. Like for over 200 years. Or haven't you heard? Mr. Z looked up from his grade book, saw the disturbance in aisle 4, and got to his feet. Speaking as he moved, he was at the scene in 3 seconds. All right here. Easy does it. Greg lowered his voice. Mora, you too. And sit down. Now, what's this about? Simple. Greg opened his pencil case and said, I started making these great little comic books, and now she's ripping me off with her stupid imitation. She's using my ideas, and it's like she's stealing money right out of my pocket. He pointed at the unicorn book on her desk. That's what this is about. Morris shook her head. What is about is you're a greedy little money grabber. Just like always. Mine, all mine. That's all you ever care about. That's a lie. All right, Mr. Z, calm down. But Mora was on her feet again. It's true. And poor little Greg can't stand it when somebody else has a good idea. Greg snorted and grabbed the Esty Bestie book. Yeah, right. Like this is a good idea. You know what this is? Garbage. Cheap, stupid garbage. Just like you. And Greg ripped the front cover off The Lost Unicorn and threw it in Mora's face. Both of you, stop this. Just stop it. It was like Mr. Z had disappeared. All Mora could see was her little book that Greg began to tear off another page. Give me that. She swung her right arm to grab for it. Greg yanked the book above his head, and Mora's hand followed the moving book. Bottom 3 knuckles of her right hand connected with a sharp crack against the left side of Greg's nose. Greg's mouth dropped open. So did Mr. Z and Mora's. There was a half second of stunned silence and then, ow! Greg clenched his nose, which began to bleed, dripping onto Mora's desk. Room 27, usually quieter than the library, flashed to life. Did you see that? What? Where? Mora. She pounded him. No way. I saw it. Look at his nose. Oh, blood. And all amid all their noises, Mora shrieked out, Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. Really, I didn't. Mr. Z wanted to take charge. He wanted to quiet the room, calm Myra, and get Greg to the nurse. But there was blood. Numbers never bled, which Mr. Z believed was one of their best qualities, because just the word blood was enough to make him start looking for a chair so he could sit down and put his head between his knees. Mr. Z turned away from Greg. Already woozy, his face was going gray, but he was stumped into the nearest empty desk, swallowing hard, and managed to say, Mora, please help. Greg, to the nurse. I'll be here. Mora rushed to the front of the room, yanked 5 or 6 tissues from the box from Mr. Z's desk and hurried back to Greg. Here! Greg accepted the tissues, but when Mora took his elbow and began steering him to the hallway, he jerked his arm free and made his own way out the door. It was bad enough he had just gotten a bloody nose from a girl. No way he was going to let the same girl turn around and help him. Mora stopped at the doorway of the nurse's office. Mrs. Emmett took charge. Sitting Greg on the black vinyl cot, she grabbed the plastic cold pack from the cabinet and smacked it on her desk 3 or 4 times to activate the crystals. She pulled on a pair of pale green gloves, took a paper towel, got it wet in the sink, and began to clean up Greg's face. Leaning forward, the nurse took the cold pack and wrapped it in a damp washcloth. Leaning over, she looked at the marks on Greg's skin and then pressed the cold pack gently against his face. Mrs. Emmett said, How'd this happen? It would have been so easy for Greg to lift his bloody hand, point a crimson finger at shout, Mora did it. He slugged me right in the nose so hard he could have yelled so loud that the principal across the hall would have heard him. But he didn't. He mumbled, It was an accident. Someone grabbed for something, and I got in the way. The nurse lifted the cold pack and touched Greg's nose carefully with her gloved finger. He flinched. Mrs. Emmett said, It's not broken, but you're going to have a black eye and a real prize winner. You need to stay here till I'm sure the bleeding is stopped. She pressed the cold pack back in place and said, Put your left hand here and press, not too hard. Greg did as he was told. Turning to the doorway, Mrs. Emmett said, Mora, do you have any blood on? Did any blood get on you? Mora looked at her hands and down in front. She shook her head. Anywhere else? Asked the nurse. Where did it happen? In Mr. Z's room. Some drops got on my desk and maybe on the floor. Mrs. Emmett nodded. I'll send the custodian with disinfectant. You should get back to class now. Mora hesitated. It was nice Greg hadn't blamed her, and she wanted him to turn and look at her. She wanted to at least nod a thanks at him, but Greg kept his eyes shut, so Mora turned and left. Miss Emmett said, Greg, I have to go find the custodian. Can you lean back on those pillows now, but stay still, all right? And she had gone. The whole side of Greg's face throbbed as he eased himself back. Great, a black eye from a girl, just what I always wanted. What Mora had said in Mr. Z's room came back to him. You're a greedy little money grabber. Just like always. Those words hurt worse than his nose. His big brother had been calling him stingy and greedy for years. Is that what they all think? That I'm a money grabber? Everyone wants a lot of money, right? What's wrong with that? Can I help it if I have good ideas and then I'm willing to work? There's nothing wrong with that. Greg became aware that he had something clenched in his right hand. He brought it up where he could see it, and it was a wad of bloody tissues and something else. Mora's mini book, The Lost Unicorn. The front cover was half gone, and some of the wrinkled pages were streaked with blood, illustrated in the living color. Greg thought that made him smile and forced a sharp pain through the nose and his left eye. He got the book in focus, and using only his right hand, he began to turn the pages. Greg couldn't tell right away that it wasn't his kind of story, which did not come as a surprise. It was about a young unicorn who had gotten lost. Not a surprise. At first, the unicorn was terrified, and then she remembered that her mother and father had told her, if you ever have a problem, find someone with a bigger problem and offer to help. Do this, and your own worries will disappear. So the unicorn went looking for someone to help and found a princess who had been kidnapped, locked in a tower by a wicked ogre. The unicorn used her horn to chop down a tree which leaned against the tower and gave the princess a way to escape. Then the unicorn gave the princess a ride back to the mother's castle. The queen was so happy to have her daughter back that she asked 10 of her best knights to help the unicorn find her way home, and they all lived happily ever after. Even though it seemed like a lame story to him, Greg had to admit that the writing was good, and then the artwork wasn't bad either. It was actually a tiny picture book, not at all like a comic book. Each of Mora's pictures took up the whole page, and there was no sequence panels, no page grids, no speech balloons like comics have. Still, the drawings were good, and Mora had drawn vines and flowers around the borders of each page. Bringing the little book closer to his good eye, Greg blinked. Then he rubbed his finger over the page. The dark gray lines smudged and smeared. He could not believe that this what he was seeing. It is an original artwork. Mora is drawing every book by hand and putting them together one at a time. No wonder she went nuts when I started ripping this one up. Greg leaned his head back and closed both eyes. Greg smiled. He had just made an important discovery. That meant that Mora did not know how to mass produce her books. That meant that she probably made only 4 or 5 of them, tops. And it meant that with her current skill level as a mini-book producer, she was not messing around, hardly a serious competitor. Mora wasn't even in the minor leagues. And as his business mind clicked away, Greg saw the future grow bright again. With the kids buying so many of his chunky comics that he would make tons of money, he wouldn't have to start getting his comics printed professionally. He'd have to hire a staff artist to keep up with the increasing demand. Maybe rent a building or buy one. He'd start a website and start selling the major comic distributors too. Eventually, he'd have to open branch offices in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Hong Kong, London too. Chunky Comics International. He'd get so rich that he could have a different limo for every day of the week, each with a comic book hero printed on the hood. Bring! Greg sat straight up, completely fuddled. He blinked. A cold pack lay on his arm. His head hurt, and he was on the cot of the nurse's office. Then the events of that day tumbled back into his memory. He'd been sound asleep. Mrs. Emmett smiled at him from her front desk. Feeling better? Yeah, a little. Greg leaned back again, reached for the cold pack. But then he made himself sit up. Actually, I feel a lot better, so I guess I should go to my next class. Greg had work to do. One more class period, and Thursday would be history. He had comics to sell. Mora came to the doorway. Hi, I bought your backpack and your pencil case. Your face looks better. Greg didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Morris said, "You going to class?" Greg looked at Miss Emmett. "Can I?" She nodded. "You should be fine, but if you feel uncomfortable, come back, all right?" "Okay." Greg stood up and walked to the door. "Thanks. You're awesome. You're welcome." Mora gave Greg his things and swung his backpack onto his shoulder, tucked the pencil case under his other arm, and headed down the long hallway towards the gym. Mora turned and walked beside him. "So," she said, "you've got gym now?" "Nope." Greg picked up his pace. Mora matched him step for step. "Language arts?" "No." "Art?" Greg walked so fast that Mora almost had to trot to keep up. "Hey," she said, "before I forget, you have to go to Mr. Z's room after school." Still walking, Greg glanced at her. "How come?" "He wants to talk to you, and me too, about what happened." "Great," said Greg. "I'll be late for soccer." Mora said, "Should you run around today? I mean, with your eye and everything?" Greg stopped short and swung to face her. "Look, it's none of your business. It was just a little poke in the nose, all right? I'm okay, and I don't need you to tell me what to do." "Fine," said Mora. "Do whatever you want. I don't care." "Good, because I don't care if you don't care, so go away." "Don't worry, I'm going." "Here," said Mora, pushed a quarter into his hand. "This is yours." "What's it for?" he asked. "For one of your comics. They're a quarter, right?" "What? You sold one?" "No," said Mora. "I bought one." That's right." Mora stuck her chin out. "Any law against that?" "No," Greg said. "But why?" "That's a stupid question. I read it in math class. It's good." Creative pride won a small victory over ill temper. Greg smiled. "You liked it? Really?" Mora nodded. "Yeah, it was okay, but..." The bell rang. "Oops, I can't be late." Mora turned and dashed for her class. "But what?" Greg called after her. "Later," she called back. And Greg thought, later? Oh yeah, because we have to go see Mr. Z. The art room was close, and Greg quickly forgot Mora's comment about his comic book. He had to finish a wire sculpture. The thing was due Monday, and that was going to take a small miracle to get it done on time. Still, that did keep Greg from selling three more comics, The Return of the Hunter, before the end of art class. That is chapter 7. I hope you have a good day.